Maria had always believed that life would become easier once she grew older. As a child, she would sit on the small steps outside her family's wooden house, watching her father return from work with dust on his clothes but a smile on his face. He used to tell her, "Hard times don't last forever, Maria. People do." She carried those words in her heart for many years. But now, standing inside the same house with bills spread across the table, she felt those words slipping away. Her father had passed away almost a year ago. His absence still felt unreal, like someone had pulled the sunlight out of her home and left shadows behind. Along with the sorrow came something heavier, unexpected debts her father had never mentioned. Maria discovered them slowly, one paper at a time, until the truth was clear. Her father had been struggling silently, probably to protect her. The land they lived on had been in the family for nearly 4 decades. It wasn't large, but it held memories in every corner. Her mother's garden, her father's tools, the tree she used to climb. Losing it would mean losing the last piece of her family. But the creditor who owned the debt didn't care about memories. He only cared about money. And he wanted it soon. Maria tried everything she could think of. She worked at the local grocery store, took extra shifts at the cafe, and even tried sewing clothes for neighbors at night. People appreciated her kindness, but kindness did not pay debts. Each month she handed over what she could, but it was never enough. The pressure felt like a rope around her heart, tightening with every passing week. Some neighbors offered help in small ways, food, advice, a few kind words, but no one had enough money to solve her problem. Whenever she walked through town, she sensed eyes on her. People loved her, but they also felt sorry for her. Maria hated being seen as someone who needed saving. One chilly morning, as she stood outside the cafe where she worked, she overheard her own name. 2 older women were chatting near the door. "Poor Maria," one whispered. "Her father left her in such a tough situation. She's too young to handle that kind of burden," the other replied with a sigh. Maria closed her eyes. She didn't want to hear any more. The only person who didn't treat her differently was Jacob, the quiet rancher who lived on the outskirts of town. People respected him. He was a man of few words, always calm, always steady. His ranch was one of the oldest in the area, and he ran it almost entirely by himself. Some people said he liked being alone. Others said he simply didn't know how to let people in. Maria only knew him through small interactions, a smile at the market, a nod of greeting when he rode past on his horse. Years ago, when she was still a teenager, she had once joked with him. He had helped her fix a broken wagon wheel after she had been stuck on the road. She had laughed nervously and told him, "If you ever save me again, I'll owe you a favor so big you can name anything." She had forgotten those words. Jacob had not. He learned about her situation by accident. One afternoon he stopped by the grocery store. Just as Maria was talking to the store owner about the latest deadline, Jacob overheard enough to understand that she was in more trouble than she let on. He didn't say anything, not then, not later. He simply left quietly, but the worry stayed in his eyes. Maria went home that evening, unaware that someone else now carried a piece of her burden in his heart. A week later, Maria received a letter asking her to come to the creditor's office. Her stomach tightened as she walked there. The man behind the desk barely looked at her as he spoke. "Your debt has been cleared." She blinked, confused. "Sorry. What?" It's paid off. In full." Her breath caught in her throat. She felt lightheaded, as if the world had suddenly tilted. She asked the question she feared was too good to be true. "Who paid it?" The man shrugged. "A rancher. Jacob Weston." Maria froze. Jacob? The quiet man who barely spoke? The man who lived miles away from town? Her mind refused to make sense of it. She left the office with trembling hands, struggling to understand why he would do such a thing. She walked to the ranch immediately. Part of her wanted to say thank you. Another part of her wanted to ask him why he had done something so big for someone who was practically a stranger. The ranch looked peaceful when she arrived. Horses grazed in the distance. Birds rested on the fence. Jacob was repairing a gate, his hands steady as always. He looked up when he saw her, surprised but not confused. It was as if he had been expecting her. "Jacob," she said, her voice shaking. "You paid my debt." He wiped his hands on his jeans, then nodded slowly. "Yes." "Why?" she asked softly. He paused. His eyes were calm but carried something deeper, something he wasn't used to showing. "You didn't deserve to lose your home," he said simply. "Your father worked hard for that land. It should stay with you." "But you hardly know me," she whispered. "I know enough," he replied. Maria didn't know what to say. Gratitude filled her chest, but so did confusion. She felt like crying, but she held herself together. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," he answered. "And now I owe you something I can never repay." Jacob shook his head immediately. "No, you don't owe me anything. But I made a promise," she said quietly, remembering the joke from years ago. "I said I'd owe you a big favor someday." His expression softened, almost like he remembered the same day. "That was a long time ago," he said. "You don't need to worry about that." But Maria wasn't the kind of person who forgot promises. Her eyes held determination even through her confusion. "Let me do something," she insisted. He hesitated at first. She could see he wasn't used to accepting help. Finally, he said, "If you really want to repay me, then come help on the ranch for a while. That's all." Maria nodded. It felt right, fair, even. She wanted to give something back, even if it wasn't equal to what he had done for her. As she walked home that day, she felt lighter than she had in months. The fear that had followed her like a long shadow was gone. But now she carried a new kind of weight, one made of gratitude, curiosity, and something she could not yet understand. Jacob had bought her freedom, yes. But he had also opened a new door in her life, one she didn't even know existed. She didn't know yet that stepping onto that ranch was the beginning of a story neither of them expected, one filled with trust, change, and a quiet connection that would grow in ways she never imagined. But for now, she only knew one thing for sure. She would keep her promise, just as he had kept his. Maria woke up the next morning with a strange mixture of peace and nervousness. For months she had opened her eyes with fear, wondering how she would face another day of endless work and heavy worries. But today felt different. The debt that had hung over her like a cloud had suddenly disappeared, thanks to Jacob. And though she still didn't fully understand his kindness, she knew she had made a promise to help him on the ranch. A promise she intended to keep. She dressed early and walked toward the ranch, the morning air cool against her skin. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky in soft colors. The fields around the town were quiet, except for the distant sound of birds calling to each other. Maria breathed deeply, trying to calm her racing heart. She wasn't afraid, she just didn't know what to expect. When she reached the ranch, she saw Jacob standing near the barn, feeding the horses. He turned when he heard her footsteps. His expression didn't change much, but there was a slight lift to his eyebrows, as if he were surprised she came so early. "You didn't have to start today," he said gently. Maria shook her head. "I gave you my word. I'm here to help, and I know ranch work starts early." Jacob nodded. "All right, then let's start." He walked ahead, and she followed him toward the barn. The place smelled of hay, fresh air, and something peaceful she couldn't name. Jacob moved with a quiet confidence, showing her how to fill feeding buckets and the right way to brush the horses' coats. Maria listened carefully to every instruction. She didn't want to just be a guest. She wanted to be useful. At first, the work felt strange. She had never handled horses before. She felt small around them, unsure whether to move fast or slow. Jacob noticed her hesitation and stepped closer, his voice calm. "They won't hurt you," he said softly. "Just talk to them a little. Let them know you're there." Maria reached out and touched a brown mare's neck. The horse leaned into her hand, almost like it was greeting her. She smiled without realizing it. "They like you," Jacob said. Maria felt warmth rise to her cheeks. "Maybe they're just being polite." "Animals don't pretend," Jacob replied. They continued working side by side. And for the first time in months, Maria felt her mind settle. There was something comforting about the rhythm of the ranch, no loud noises, no rushing, no fear of unexpected bills. Just open land and steady work. At one point, Maria tried to lift a heavy sack of grain. Jacob noticed and stepped forward quickly. "It's heavy," he warned. "I can manage," she said, determined not to seem weak. But the sack didn't move. She pulled again, still stubborn. Jacob watched her for a moment, then gently took the sack with one hand and lifted it easily. Maria crossed her arms. "You could have helped earlier. I was waiting to see if you'd ask," he replied. "I didn't want to," she admitted. Jacob smiled, one of the rare smiles that softened his whole face. "I figured." They carried on with the chores, and even though Maria felt tired, she didn't want to stop. The ranch had a calmness she hadn't known she needed. Jacob worked quietly, but she could tell he was paying attention to her efforts. Whenever she struggled, he stepped in without making her feel small. Whenever she did something right, he nodded with approval that meant more than any long speech could. By noon, they took a break and sat on the wooden fence overlooking the open field. The wind brushed past them, carrying the scent of grass and warm earth. Maria wiped sweat from her forehead. "Is this your whole life?" she asked softly. "This ranch?" Jacob looked out across the land. "Yes. It's all I've known." "Doesn't it get lonely?" He took a moment before answering. "Sometimes. But it's honest work. And the quiet helps me think." Maria nodded. She could understand that. After everything she'd been through, silence sometimes felt safer than words. After lunch, they fixed a broken section of fencing. Maria watched how carefully Jacob measured every board, how focused he was on even the smallest details. He treated the ranch almost like a living thing, something he cared for, something he respected. She admired that about him. As they hammered the last nail, Jacob paused and said, "You don't have to do this every day. I know you have other work in town." "I want to," Maria said firmly. "You helped me when no one else could. This is the least I can do." He looked at her for a long moment. Not in pity. Not in discomfort. Just curious, as if trying to understand why someone would feel such a strong obligation. "You don't owe me anything," he repeated. "Yes, I do," she insisted gently. "Maybe not for the money, but for giving me my life back. I was losing everything." Quote, Jacob's eyes softened. "You were never going to lose yourself. Just the land. The land is part of me," she said quietly. "It's all I have left." He didn't argue with her. Instead, he nodded slowly, accepting her feelings. They continued working until the sun dipped low in the sky. When it was time for her to leave, Maria felt a strange reluctance. She enjoyed the calmness of the ranch, the quiet company, the steady rhythm of the day. Her heart felt lighter than it had in a long time. As she walked toward the gate, Jacob called out, "Maria." She turned. "Thank you," he said, "for helping today." She smiled. "Thank you. For everything." When she walked home, she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, not just gratitude, but something she didn't yet have a name for. The town looked different now. The same streets, the same houses, but her world felt like it had widened. People in town had started noticing her new schedule. Some whispered with curious eyes. A few smiled knowingly, and though Maria didn't pay much attention, she heard one woman mutter to a friend, "Maybe something's happening between her and the rancher." Maria's cheeks warmed at the idea. She didn't know what to think. All she knew was that Jacob had been kind in a way she didn't expect. He didn't talk much, didn't ask for anything, didn't make her feel small. He simply helped, and that kindness touched her more deeply than she cared to admit. That night, while sitting on the front step of her home, Maria thought about the day. She remembered Jacob's steady hands, his calm voice, the way he quietly watched over the ranch. She remembered how he said animals didn't pretend. She wondered if people pretended without realizing it. A soft breeze passed through the yard. Maria closed her eyes and let herself feel the peacefulness she had been missing for so long. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in months, she felt hopeful. She had promised to help Jacob. But deep inside, she knew something else was beginning. something she couldn't fully explain yet. A connection, a gentle pull, a quiet understanding forming between two people who had spent too long carrying heavy loads alone. She didn't know it yet, but her life had already begun to change, and Jacob, the man who helped her stand again, would become much more important than she ever expected. Over the next several weeks, Maria's life began to follow a new rhythm. Each morning, she woke up early, tied her hair back, and walked toward Jacob's ranch. The walk itself became comforting. The cool air, the quiet roads, and the steady sound of her footsteps felt like a new beginning. She no longer felt the weight of debt or the fear of losing her home. Instead, she carried a gentle excitement she couldn't fully explain. At the ranch, Jacob was always there before her. He never slept late. He treated the early hours as his closest friend. Sometimes she found him repairing tools, other times tending to the animals or checking the fences. No matter what he was doing, he always stopped to greet her with a small nod. "You're here," he would say simply, and Maria always smiled. "Of course, I said I'd help." Their work together became smoother day by day. Maria learned how to measure feed properly, how to groom the horses, and even how to gently guide them from one area of the ranch to another. The horses trusted her more now. They recognized her voice, and she grew more confident around them. One day, while brushing a young horse named Willow, Maria laughed because the horse kept nudging her shoulder. Jacob looked up from across the barn. "She likes you. Or she's trying to get rid of the dust on her nose," Maria said. Jacob's lips curved into one of his rare smiles. "Maybe both." Moments like these became more frequent. Their conversations were simple but warm. Maria often found herself watching Jacob while he worked, how patient he was with every task, how he listened more than he spoke, how he carried a quiet strength she had never noticed in anyone else. Jacob, too, found himself observing Maria when she wasn't looking. He noticed how she tried her best, even when something was new to her. He saw the softness in her eyes when she spoke to the horses. He admired her determination, her gentle nature, and the way she filled the ranch with a sense of life he hadn't felt in years. One afternoon, they worked together to fix a fence near the back field. The sun was warm, and shadows stretched long across the grass. Maria held the wooden boards while Jacob hammered them in place. "You're getting good at this," Jacob said. "It's because you're a good teacher," she replied. He paused as if thinking about her words. "I don't teach much." "Well," Maria said with a smile, "maybe you just needed the right student." Jacob looked at her for a moment, longer than usual. His eyes were steady but soft, and Maria felt her heartbeat change rhythm. She quickly glanced away, pretending to focus on the fence. She didn't want him to see the warmth spreading across her cheeks, but Jacob had noticed. Later that day, they rested under a tree near the field. Jacob handed her a bottle of water, and she thanked him. They sat in peaceful silence for a while, watching the horses graze in the distance. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. "Is it always this peaceful here?" Maria asked quietly. Jacob nodded. "Most days. That's why I love this place. The ranch listens. It doesn't rush. It doesn't demand too much. It just exists." "I think I needed this peace," Maria admitted. "I didn't realize how tired I was until I came here." Jacob turned slightly, watching her closely. "You were carrying too much alone." Maria lowered her eyes. "I didn't know who to ask for help." "You didn't have to ask," Jacob said softly. "Sometimes people care even when you're quiet." Her heart gave a small, unexpected flutter. She didn't know how to respond, so she simply nodded. As the days passed, the town began to notice Maria's connection to the ranch. People whispered and smiled when she walked by, some with curiosity, others with amusement. Maria tried to ignore them, but the whispers felt louder each day. One morning, while buying bread from the local bakery, two women standing near the counter exchanged glances. "There she is," one whispered. "Always going to the ranch these days. Maybe she's found something there," the other said with a knowing smile. Maria pretended she didn't hear them, but their words stayed with her as she walked to the ranch. She wondered what Jacob would think of the town's gossip. Would he be embarrassed? Would he want her to stop coming? When she reached the ranch, she found him fixing a saddle. She hesitated before speaking. "Jacob," she said softly, "I hope my coming here isn't causing trouble." He looked up, confused. "Why would it?" "I think people are talking," she said quietly. Jacob leaned back slightly, studying her expression. "Does it bother you?" Maria shook her head. "Not exactly. I just don't want to bring you any problems." Jacob's voice was calm but firm. "People can talk. It doesn't change the truth. You're helping here because you want to. Nothing else matters." His words eased her worries more than she expected. She hadn't realized how much his opinion mattered until that moment. As the days grew warmer, Maria started joining Jacob on short rides around the ranch. He taught her how to sit properly on the saddle, how to guide the horse gently, and how to stay balanced. She was nervous at first, gripping the reins too tightly, but Jacob stayed close. "You're doing fine," he reassured her. "Just breathe." Once she relaxed, the world felt different from the horse's back, bigger, quieter, beautiful in a way she had never noticed before. Riding became one of her favorite parts of the day. One evening, as they rode along the edge of the property, the sun dipped behind the hills, casting everything in a warm golden glow. The silence between them felt comfortable, like a soft blanket. "It's beautiful," Maria whispered. Jacob glanced at her, seeing the awe in her eyes. "Yes," he said softly. "It is," but he wasn't looking at the sunset. Maria didn't see his gaze. She was too lost in the moment, feeling free in a way she hadn't felt in years. Soon, working together became more than a promise, it became a connection. They talked about small things, the weather, the animals, their favorite meals. Sometimes they talked about deeper things too. Maria shared stories of her father, the garden her mother once grew, the dreams she once had but set aside. Jacob listened quietly, absorbing every word. When she finished one story about a childhood memory, Jacob said softly, "Your father must have been proud of you." Maria felt unexpected tears form, but she blinked them away. "I hope so." Jacob didn't say anything more, but the look in his eyes said enough: respect, understanding, and a quiet admiration. Slowly, they began to rely on each other. Maria helped Jacob with work he had been doing alone for years. Jacob helped her feel safe, seen, and valued again. One evening, after a long day of work, Maria leaned against the barn door and watched Jacob finish putting tools away. She couldn't explain the feeling growing inside her. It wasn't just gratitude, it wasn't just friendship, it was something deeper, slow, gentle, and surprising. Jacob stood up and met her eyes. "You look tired," he said. "A good kind of tired," she replied. Jacob nodded, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. But in that silence, something unspoken passed between them, something warm, something true. Maria walked home that night with a full heart. She knew something was changing inside her, something she wasn't ready to name yet. But she also sensed that the ranch, and Jacob, were becoming a bigger part of her life than she had ever expected. She didn't know what the future would bring, but she felt certain of one thing. She was no longer walking through life alone. Something real had begun. The days at the ranch continued to pass in a gentle, steady rhythm, but something inside Maria was changing. She no longer came to the ranch only because of her promise. She came because she wanted to. She came because she felt calm there, because she felt understood, and because she felt a connection growing quietly between her and Jacob. Still, she tried to hide it. She was afraid her feelings were only the result of gratitude, and she didn't want to mistake kindness for something deeper. She didn't want to confuse comfort with love, but each day, it became harder to ignore the flutter in her chest whenever Jacob looked at her with those calm, steady eyes. Maria often found herself watching him when he didn't notice, like when he walked through the fields with confident steps, or when he knelt beside a horse with gentle hands, or when he listened to her with complete attention, as if her words truly mattered. She wondered if he ever noticed her in the same quiet way. Jacob, meanwhile, tried to keep his own heart steady. He wasn't a man who spoke easily about his feelings. Most of his life had been silent work and simple days. But Maria brought something new: warmth, laughter, softness. He had grown used to the sound of her voice, the way she hummed while working, the way she brought light into every corner of the ranch. Every day, he felt himself caring for her more deeply, though he kept those feelings carefully hidden. One late afternoon, the weather began to change unexpectedly. The sky darkened as thick clouds gathered over the hills. Maria and Jacob had been working near the back field, checking the fence lines again. The air felt heavy, as if the sky held its breath. "We should head back," Jacob said. Glancing upward, Maria nodded. They started walking. But halfway across the field, a sudden gust of wind rushed through the air. Leaves scattered, and the horses in the distance lifted their heads nervously. "It's coming fast," Jacob said. "Let's hurry." They made it to the barn, just as large drops of rain began to fall. Within moments, the quiet afternoon had turned into a storm. Rain poured down like a curtain, and the wind howled around the building. Inside the barn, they stood, catching their breath. The old wooden structure creaked slightly under the force of the wind, but it was sturdy enough to protect them. Maria brushed a strand of wet hair from her face and laughed softly. "Well, that was unexpected." Jacob shook his head with a small smile. "Weather out here doesn't always give warnings." Thunder rumbled softly, and the horses moved nervously in their stalls. Without hesitation, Maria stepped toward them and began speaking in a calming voice, running her hand down their necks one by one. Jacob watched her with quiet admiration. "You make them feel safe," he said. Maria looked up, surprised. "I think they just like soft voices." He shook his head. "It's not just your voice." She felt her cheeks warm but said nothing. The storm grew stronger, and the barn felt smaller with the sound of wind pushing against it. Maria and Jacob worked together to check every latch, making sure nothing would come loose. When they finished, they stood near the center of the barn, watching the rain pour through the small gaps in the roof. The sound was loud, but the feeling was peaceful, like the world outside was washing itself clean. Maria wrapped her arms around herself. "I hope the storm doesn't last too long." "It won't," Jacob said. "Storms around here move fast." She nodded, staring at the falling rain. After a moment, she spoke softly. "Jacob, can I ask you something?" "Of course," he replied. "Why did you really help me? I know you said it was because my father worked hard, but I feel like maybe there was more." Jacob didn't answer right away. He looked at her, his expression gentle but serious. The sound of rain filled the silence between them. "Maria," he said quietly, "I didn't help you because I expected anything back. I helped you because it hurt to see you carrying a burden alone, and because I care." Her heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure if she heard him correctly. "You care?" Jacob nodded slowly. "Yes. I didn't want you to lose the place you loved. I didn't want you to be afraid of your future. You deserved better." Maria felt her breath catch. Her chest tightened in a way that wasn't painful, just full. Overwhelmed. She looked into his eyes, trying to understand everything he wasn't saying aloud. "Jacob, I don't know what to say," she whispered. "You don't have to say anything," he said gently. "I just wanted you to know the truth." The storm continued outside, but inside the barn, everything felt strangely calm. Maria felt a warmth spread through her chest, like a soft light glowing from within. She didn't feel confused anymore. She didn't feel uncertain. Instead, she felt something beautiful rising to the surface, something she had been too afraid to admit until now. She stepped a little closer, her eyes still on him. "I care too, Jacob. More than I meant to." Jacob took a quiet breath, almost in surprise. His eyes softened in a way she had never seen before. "I didn't want you to feel like you owed me anything," he said. "I don't," she replied. "Not anymore. Not for the debt. Not for the ranch. But I care because of who you are. Not because of what you did." Jacob lowered his gaze for a moment, as if gathering courage. When he looked back up, his voice was soft. "I've kept my distance because I didn't want to push you. You've been through so much." "You didn't push me," she said. "You made me feel safe." The words hung between them, gentle and honest. For a moment, they simply stood there, listening to the rain, letting their feelings settle around them like warm air. A sudden crash of thunder made the horses shuffle anxiously again, and both of them turned toward the stalls. Together, they checked on each animal, calming them with slow touches and soft voices. Working side by side in the dim, warm light of the barn, they felt like a team connected, steady, natural. When the rain finally began to ease, Maria realized how long they had been standing together. Hours had passed without her noticing. The storm had forced them into the barn, but it had also opened something between them, something quiet, deep, and real. As the sky lightened, they stepped outside to see the world washed clean. The air felt fresh, the grass sparkling with droplets of water. A golden glow spread across the horizon as the sun peeked through the clouds. "It's beautiful," Maria said softly. Jacob nodded. "It is." She glanced at him and realized he wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking at her, just as he had during the sunset the week before. And this time, she understood what the look meant. They walked back toward the house together, closer than before but still careful, still quiet. Neither of them spoke about the feelings they had shared, but they didn't need to. Something had changed. Something had grown roots. Maria felt lighter, as if her heart had been waiting for that moment. She knew she was no longer at the ranch because of a promise. She was there because she cared deeply for the man who had given her hope again. Jacob felt the same. For the first time in a long while, he felt something like joy awakening in him, steady, gentle, and honest. Neither of them said it aloud yet, but both knew it. Their hearts had begun to move toward each other, slowly and naturally, like the calm after a storm. The morning after Mateo's quiet confession felt different for both of them. Although no grand promises had been spoken aloud, Emma could feel something new settling inside her heart. Something steady, warm, and impossibly gentle. She moved around the house with a calm that surprised even her. The weight she once carried, the fear of being unwanted or misunderstood, seemed much lighter now. Mateo, too, felt a shift. He woke up earlier than usual, walked through the ranch with an unexplainable excitement, and caught himself smiling at moments that used to feel ordinary. He fed the horses, checked the fences, and then stopped near the barn, where the sun fell in a warm stretch across the ground. He took a deep breath because he knew that the day ahead would change everything. It wasn't fear, he felt just a kind of nervous joy, like someone standing at the edge of a new beginning. Emma soon joined him outside. She stood in the soft morning light, her hair loose around her shoulders, the breeze playing with it gently. Mateo looked at her for a long moment, and she sensed his eyes on her. When their gazes met, neither of them turned away. Something unspoken passed between them, something that didn't need a title or a label. They spent most of the morning working together. At one point, they brushed the horses side by side, their hands occasionally touching. Another time, they worked in the garden, close enough to feel each other's warmth. Everything felt natural, like they had always existed this way. In the afternoon, Mateo suggested they take a ride to the far meadow. It wasn't far, but it was the most peaceful part of the ranch open land, bordered by tall trees and wildflowers. Emma agreed instantly. She loved the meadow. It felt like a quiet world of its own, where she could breathe freely. When they arrived, the meadow looked more beautiful than usual. The grass moved in soft waves, birds flew lazily across the sky, and the sunlight created small patches of gold on the ground. Emma breathed in deeply and felt a rare kind of freedom settle in her chest. Mateo didn't rush into anything. He simply watched her, memorizing the way she smiled at the open space. Finally, he walked closer, stopping just a few steps away from her. "You look happy," he said softly. She turned her head toward him and nodded. "I am. I never thought I would feel this way again." Mateo took his hat off and held it in one hand. His other hand reached for hers, and when she didn't pull away, he felt courage rise inside him. "You once told me to keep my promise," he said. "And I did. But there's something else I want to promise now. Something I want you to hear clearly." Emma's heart beat a little faster, but she didn't interrupt. "I don't want you to feel like you owe me anything," he continued. "I don't want you to stay because you think you should. I want you to stay because it's where you feel safe. Because it's where you want to be." Emma looked at him with deep emotion in her eyes. Months ago, she wouldn't have believed a moment like this was even possible. She had been so lost, so unsure of where life was taking her, and now here she was, standing with someone who had shown her more kindness than she had ever received. "You never asked anything from me," she whispered. "You simply helped me, and that's why I stayed." Mateo's voice grew even softer. "Emma, I want you to stay for more than that." She didn't look away. "Tell me," she said. His breath caught for a moment as he finally spoke the words he had been holding in. "I want you to stay as my wife." The world around them seemed to pause. Emma stared at him, her eyes wide, her breath caught somewhere between surprise and overwhelming emotion. Mateo didn't move closer. He let her have the space to think, to feel, to understand that his question was not born from sudden emotion or obligation, but from months of quiet care and genuine respect. "I didn't ask this because of what you've been through," he said slowly. "I'm asking because of the woman you are. Your strength, your kindness, the way you've brought peace into this place. The way you've brought peace into me." Emma swallowed hard. "Mateo, I don't know if I deserve that." He shook his head instantly. "You deserve everything good in this world." Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not tears of sadness. They were the kind that came when a heart softened after years of feeling hardened. She had lived too long, believing she wasn't enough, believing she didn't deserve a place where she mattered. Here, in the meadow, with the wind touching her face softly, she finally felt chosen for the right reasons. "I'm scared," she admitted. "I know," Mateo said, "and I'll never push you. You can take your time." For a long moment, Emma looked at the ground, then back at his sincere eyes. Slowly, she stepped closer. Her hand found his again, and she held it gently. "I don't need time," she whispered. "I already know my answer." The words came out like a quiet breath, like something she had been holding inside for far too long. "I want to be your wife." Mateo exhaled deeply, as if releasing months of silent hope. He lifted her hand and held it between both of his. His smile was warm, so warm that Emma felt herself melting inside. They stood together in the meadow, not needing grand gestures or dramatic declarations. The quiet whisper of the grass around them felt like nature's blessing. Everything was peaceful, soft, and perfect. Their wedding took place 2 weeks later, not a large event, just a small gathering with a few neighbors and ranch workers. The ceremony was simple, but the happiness in the air made it feel special. Emma wore a modest dress that one of the ranch women had helped sew. Mateo stood tall beside her, his eyes shining with calm pride. When the vows were spoken, Emma felt tears slide down her face, but she didn't hide them. For the first time in years, she was crying because her heart was full, not because it was hurting. After the ceremony, they shared a quiet meal with the small group that had come to support them. People laughed, shared stories, and complimented Emma on her new life. She felt like she finally belonged somewhere. That night, the ranch felt even warmer. Emma walked through the house as a wife now, still adjusting to the beautiful reality. Mateo had placed small flowers in a vase on the table, something he had never done before. She smiled when she saw them. When he joined her, they sat together on the porch, watching the stars. The night sky stretched endlessly above them, a silent witness to their new beginning. "This place used to feel too big," Mateo admitted quietly. "Too empty. But now it finally feels like a home." Emma leaned her head gently on his shoulder. "It feels like home to me too," she whispered. He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. Not with urgency, but with a tenderness that made her heart soften even more. "You bought my freedom," she said softly, "but you also gave me something more." Mateo looked down at her. "What's that?" "A life worth living." He didn't respond right away. Instead, he kissed the top of her head gently. The moment felt complete, simple, warm, and filled with the quiet promise of a future they would build together. The ranch no longer felt like a place she arrived in by accident. It felt like destiny, like the place she was always meant to find. And though life would still bring challenges, Emma knew she had someone by her side who would face every one of them with her. In the end, she didn't just gain safety or a home. She gained love. She gained peace. She gained a partner who chose her not out of obligation, but out of genuine affection. And the rancher, who once lived a quiet life of solitude, gained something he never expected: a wife who filled his world with warmth and meaning. Their story wasn't dramatic or loud. It was simple, honest, and heartfelt, two people finding each other at the exact moment life needed to change. And sometimes, that is the most beautiful kind of story of all.